mokopuna a hikirangi maunga, a wae pulaua, a Ngāti Porou iwi e mihi ake nei ki a koutou Ngāti whenua te mana o tēnei whenua te mana o wēnei wai tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou kua whakawātea mai tēnei wā, i raro i te marumaru o te wāhingaro. Te wāhingaro kua whakakīnia mai, e ngā wairua no Palestine, no reira tēnā koutou. Kia ora koutou, my name is Ngata. I'm an Indigenous rights advocate, an environmental rights and a human rights advocate. And I want to mihi to the organisers and I want to mihi to the people of Palestine for holding the line against colonialism longer than any other place on this earth. What we see happening in Palestine is colonialism stripped back to its purest form. The intent to eradicate, the absence of boundaries and morals, the targeting of women and children, which is functional. It is functional in sending a message that there is no depth that their colonial violence will not sink to. The attacks upon women and children are not collateral. They are targeted by design to terrorise, to traumatise and to demoralise. And they're failing because we are not demoralised. We are the ones holding on to the morals, holding on to the ethics and holding on to the values. The great anti-colonial feminist Aotearoa said, to overcome the most brutal core, let us all take note, Aotearoa, this is the true nature of colonialism. This is the extent that it will go to in its self-interest. We don't just oppose Israel as Indigenous peoples, but as a matter of our own humanity. That said, colonialism is always intended to eradicate, and it should be a matter that all humanity should stand against everywhere it happens. But not all of humanity sees colonialism as harmful. Just last year, Paul Goldsmith, the current Minister for Justice, said that overall colonialism is a beneficial force. Shame. Even Israel has proudly claimed its own colonial status. Past President Ben-Gurion, the first Israeli president, was very clear that Israel are the colonial aggressors. Isaac Herzog, the current president, has said that the genocidal war they are waging in Palestine is in defence of Western values. You know where Western values belong? In the West. In Western Europe. You ain't gonna drown me out, Density Church. Indigenous people recognise the language of colonialism. It just drove past. We see the lie that Western Europe is the source of all civilization and modern values. They're barely speaking in code when they say that. What they mean is that it's a war being waged in defense of colonialism. The nation state of Israel wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for Western colonialism and the power structures that it put in place. It is a Western imperial outpost. Israel is not and never has been, by its own repeated admission, an indigenous nation. It has always been, by its own repeated admission, a colonial project of the West. But again, not all humanity can see that, because humanity has been taught by the colonial system that genocide isn't genocide when it's carried out by the West. It has been built upon the lie that there is one set of laws that should apply to the West and another set of laws that should apply to everybody else. Here in Aotearoa, We, Māori, can see that because we have been putting up with people who justify and reframe genocide for 184 years. Shame! One of our first parliamentarians famously said that the Māori are dying out. Our good compassionate duty as good colonists is to smooth the pillow of the dying race. We weren't just organically dying out, we were being killed by colonisation. It was a genocide. And the best our government could do was not to stop the genocide, but to make it more comfortable. And that is the mark, in their mind, of being a good coloniser, to make genocide more comfortable. That's how twisted colonial logic is. Shame! And it sounds an awful lot like governments who today want to send aid to Palestine whilst failing to stop the colonial violence in the first place. Shame! And in fact enabling violence against nations like Yemen who are actually standing up and showing up against the violence. Shame! It is because we as Indigenous peoples have held the line against colonial violence here in Aotearoa that we can readily identify Israel as a colonial aggressor. And that is why we can reject any Israeli claim as an Indigenous nation. They are not Indigenous, they are colonizers. They are only trying to claim Indigenous status now because it's convenient for them to do that, and what a kick in the teeth to our Indigenous leaders who have given their lives to raise the profile of Indigenous rights. They will not take that term Indigenous off us. They are colonisers, they are behaving like colonisers, they're talking like colonisers, they're killing like colonisers. If colonisers quacked, they'd be quacking like colonisers. They're a part of the global colonial project, which includes the great colonisers of the USA and the UK, and the colonial alliance of the USA, Canada, UK, Australia and New Zealand to Indigenous peoples called the Colonial Type 5, and also includes white supremacist organisations who are anti-Indigenous, anti-Māori, anti-Muslim, anti-migrant. Shame! And all of them want to support colonialism, even though colonialism will ultimately spell an end to our existence on this planet. So if you stand for Papatūānuku, you have to stand for Palestine. If you stand against climate injustice, you have to stand against the Israeli colonial regime and its occupation as a fundamental expression of colonial violence. Actual Indigenous activists recognise this. Actual Indigenous rights groups would never truck with anti-Māori, anti-migrant, nationalist, white supremacists like Julian Batchelor or Action Zealandia or Groundswell or the Free Speech Union or the Taxpayers Union. So when you see the likes of Density Church or the so-called Indigenous Coalition for Israel, who affiliate to all of those white supremacist groups that I just mentioned, when you see them claiming to be working in Indigenous interests, I am here to tell you with my whole Māori activist chest, they are liars. They are not Indigenous, they are colonisers. We, the tangata whenua of Aotearoa, have made it very clear, if you stand with the environment, if you stand with climate justice, if you stand with women's rights, children's rights, if you stand with human rights and equity, you must stand with and for Palestine. And for us, we will continue to stand with Palestine for all of those reasons. I te ao, I te pō. From the beginning of the colonial project until we are all free, ka papai tonu mātou, ake, 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 ka papai tonu mātou, ake, ake.